Hey guys, Shay here and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some tips and tricks for Premiere Pro users to help you guys be way more efficient. So without any hesitation, let's hop into Premiere Pro and get right into the video. So the first tip I have for you guys is something that I see a lot of beginners not using, and that is nested sequences. So let's create a nested sequence and then I can show you how that works. So for this example, I have some stock visual and audio layers. And to create a nested sequence, you basically select as many layers as you want. I'll just select these two video ones over here. Right click, nest. You can rename the nest what you want and then hit OK. Immediately, you'll see your layers have now merged into one layer and the color of the layer has changed. So essentially what happened is the two video layers that I previously selected got combined into this one nested sequence over here. And if you want to access that nest, you basically just double click onto the layer and now you can see those two layers are right here. This can be extremely useful if you've got tens or hundreds of layers that need to be organized and sorted out, and it can make your timeline look way more readable. Just remember, however, that any edits or changes that I made to the nested sequence will affect every layer within it. The next tip I have for you guys is the use of adjustment layers. Adjustment layers can also be used in conjunction with nested sequences, and I'm going to show you how you can do that. So to create an adjustment layer, head to your Projects tab, hit this little icon over here for a new item, and then click Adjustment Layer. I would recommend setting the adjustment layer to the resolution of your video, so in this case 1920 by 1080, and then hitting OK. Your adjustment layer will appear as a new item under your Projects tab. To add it to your timeline, simply drag it into the timeline. Essentially, an adjustment layer is an empty object that you can add transitions and effects to or changes to, and it will directly affect any layers that are below it. As you can see from earlier, we still have our nested sequence, which was just two clips added together. And if I was to click the adjustment layer, head over to Lumetri Color, and maybe let's say add some exposure, you can see that the clips below get affected. However, the effects are actually happening on the adjustment layer. So if I was to hide the adjustment layer, you can see that the effects are now removed. This can be really useful because now we don't have to go into the nest and edit each sequence. We can just add an adjustment layer, add an effect, and it will affect every layer that's below it. So onto our third tip, we have the editing or interpolation of keyframes. You've probably added keyframes before in Premiere Pro, but you probably don't know that you can actually edit them. If you're familiar with Adobe After Effects, you would know that this is very similar to the graph editor. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to create two scaling keyframes. So I've created two keyframes here that essentially just zooms into our clip. But if I was to play that back, you would see that it's pretty rigid. So to edit these keyframes, all you have to do is select them, right click on them, and then hit Bezier. Once you hit Bezier, you can click this drop down menu under the property you've edited, and now you're presented with a small graph editor. You can drag these handlebars to essentially edit the curve of the keyframe. Now, if we watch that clip back, we can see that the zoom in is far smoother. You don't only have to use this for scaling, you can use it for positioning effects, rotation effects, or any other effect that allows you to create and edit keyframes. Interpolating keyframes essentially allows you to change any temporal or time aspects that occur between two keyframes. This can be used to either smoothen out animations or make them even more rigid or even more exaggerated. Onto our fourth tip, we have custom editing layouts. Premiere Pro might seem very daunting to new users, and that's also because the interface isn't the most friendly. The Premiere Pro interface might seem quite daunting in compared to other software like Vegas Pro. So a really useful tip I recommend for beginners is to actually use the pre-made workspaces for different parts and different aspects of your video editing process. If you want a more in-depth video on the different aspects of the video editing process, check it out. I made one, it's in the link in the description. But essentially, to change your workspace in Premiere Pro, you just gotta click the little Windows tab up here, Workspaces, and you're presented with 9 workspaces that you can choose from. If you're just starting the video editing process and you need to compile and lay out all your clips on your timeline, the Assemblies tab could be especially useful for that purpose. And then when you need to color grade your video, the color tab is a more suited and preferred interface when you get to that stage of the video editing process. There are also keyboard shortcuts that you can use to access these different interfaces. And once you're more familiar with the different parts, tabs, and interfaces of Premiere Pro, you can customize them to create your own interface simply by setting it up and then clicking Save as a new workspace. I have one here, and this is my preferred interface for editing. However, if you don't want to create your own, the pre-made interfaces can really help beginners be more efficient in their video editing journey. The fifth and final tip I have for you guys is to make use of the Adobe Atmosphere. Adobe creates the apps in such a way that each of them can be used in conjunction to one another. Especially with Premiere Pro as its compositing software, you can use other apps like After Effects, Media Encoder, Illustrator, and Animate to have a more efficient workflow. For example, you can render your videos from Premiere Pro inside Media Encoder by hitting File, Export, and then Send to Media Encoder. That will open up Media Encoder so that you can just export it from there. You can also bring in and dynamically link After Effects compositions to your Premiere Pro timeline so that any effects made in After Effects will have a real-time effect in your Premiere Pro project. This can be really useful if you've got a lot of motion graphics like intros and lower thirds and any other overlays inside your Premiere Pro timeline. Because Premiere Pro cannot edit or animate motion graphics, if you have an After Effects composition that's dynamically linked to your timeline, you can create all your changes in After Effects. You can also bring in your Illustrator and Photoshop files right into Premiere Pro without having to render them, so that if there are any changes made to your PSD or AI files, they can be viewed in real time in Premiere Pro. And that's all the tips I have for you guys for now. Please do like and subscribe and follow my socials, link in the description, if you guys want to see more content like this. But up until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.